21 Reasons Why Sagittarius is the most misunderstood soul in the entire zodiac. Have you ever stood in front of someone who smiled so freely, who spoke as if their soul had wings, and yet behind that light, you could sense an old ache that words could never quite describe? That's Sagittarius. They laugh with the stars in their eyes and dream like the world has no fences. But beneath that wild freedom lies a tenderness, an ancient wisdom, a heartbreak carried across lifetimes. And that is why Sagittarius is often the most misunderstood soul in the zodiac. They're seen as wanderers, runners, unattached. But what most people never realize is that Sagittarians don't run to escape. They run to understand, to heal, to carry light to the forgotten corners of the world and bring truth where silence has lasted too long. In this video, I will walk with you through 21 sacred truths, each one a thread of Sagittarius's soul, woven from joy, pain, purpose, and fire. If you've ever loved a Sagittarius, or if you are one, then stay with me. You're not alone. You've simply been walking in a world that doesn't always recognize how sacred your light truly is. My name is Sophia, and on this path through the stars and through the soul, I walk beside you. If what you hear touches your heart, let it echo outwards. Like, share, and subscribe, not as a habit but as a blessing. This is not just a video. It's a remembering. And your soul wouldn't be here if it weren't time to come home. Gate 1. Because they seek truth even when it breaks them. To understand a Sagittarius is to understand a soul that was born not to settle, but to seek. Not to follow paths carved by others, but to blaze trails no one dared to walk before. And yet, this very nature, the relentless desire for meaning, for truth, for something that feels real in a world full of noise, is the first reason they are so often misunderstood. Sagittarius doesn't chase experiences just for pleasure. They chase them because their soul remembers something most people have forgotten. That life is not meant to be endured in silence but explored in wonder, even when it hurts. From the outside, they may seem like free spirits who can't commit, who are afraid of roots, who laugh too easily and leave too soon. But that's not the truth. The truth is they carry a restlessness born from lifetimes of confinement. A hunger not for distraction, but for revelation. They want to know why we're here, what this all means, and why their heart keeps burning with questions no one else dares to ask. They've never been satisfied with half answers or surface smiles. If you lie to them, they may not call you out, but they will disappear. Not because they hate you, but because they can no longer be in a space where authenticity has died. There's a story I once heard from a woman who was married to a Sagittarius man for 12 years. She said, "He never stopped asking questions. Not about me, not about the world. Even when our marriage was unraveling, he'd say, 'But what is the truth here? What are we not saying?' She used to think it was exhausting, his need to dissect everything, to dive deeper. Only later did she realize it was the most loving thing he could do. He wasn't trying to win the argument. He was trying to save the connection through understanding. But truth is a dangerous thing in a world built on denial. And those who seek it, like Sagittarius, often end up burned by it. Many Sagittarius souls carry wounds that aren't visible. Wounds from speaking a truth too soon. From leaving a place where comfort was king and change was feared. They've been told they're too intense, too blunt, too much. But what others don't see is how much they filter, how often they hold back the full fire of their insight because they know not everyone is ready. They've learned to soften their honesty, to hide the full force of what they see. Not to deceive, but to protect. Because when a Sagittarius truly speaks from the deepest part of their soul, it can shake the ground under your feet. One Sagittarius I knew once ended a relationship not with anger, but with a quiet letter. In it, she wrote, "I can't stay in a place where my truth is something to be managed instead of something to be embraced. I'd rather be alone than slowly become someone I no longer recognize." That's what most people miss. When a Sagittarius leaves, it's not because they stopped loving. It's because staying would mean betraying the truth inside them. And for Sagittarius, truth is sacred. It is the language of the soul. And no matter how much they love you, if they have to silence that voice within just to make you comfortable, they will walk away. Not to punish you, but to keep themselves alive. They are not afraid of being alone. They are afraid of losing themselves in spaces that no longer feel honest. They will sit beside you in silence if the silence is real. But if every word between you has become performance, they will stand up and walk into the night, letting the stars guide them toward something more aligned, because they believe there is always more. A higher truth, a deeper love, a wider path waiting just beyond the ridge. That belief has made them brave, but it has also made them lonely. And still they keep walking. They keep asking. They keep showing up in rooms where they don't quite belong, hoping to meet another soul brave enough to say, "I don't know everything, but I'm willing to find out." That is the truest language Sagittarius speaks, the language of questing. Not conquering, not dominating, but exploring, within and without. And this is why so many mistake them for reckless or commitment phobic. They think the Sagittarius soul cannot settle. But what they don't see is that Sag will settle, beautifully, powerfully, with a love that is earth and sky combined, but only when the truth between them and another is pure. Only when the connection leaves room for questions, for change, for the sacred dance between freedom and belonging. They don't need perfection. They need honesty. They don't crave constant excitement. They crave authenticity. If they laugh, it's because something sacred has touched their heart. If they cry, it's because the truth has finally broken through. If they leave, it's because staying would cost them too much of their own essence. But when they stay, when they choose you, it means they've seen something true, something rare. And they will love you with the kind of fire that doesn't just warm a room. It lights a new path in the dark. If you're a Sagittarius and you've ever been told you're too much, too intense, too changeable, this is your reminder. You are not too much. You are the exact medicine a stagnant world needs. You weren't born to keep the peace at the cost of your soul. You were born to question the false peace and bring light to what's been buried. So keep asking, keep walking, keep seeking the truth, even if it scares those around you. Because in a world that often settles for surface, you are one of the few brave enough to dive into the deep. Gate 2, because they let go of what they love to stay true to themselves. There comes a moment in every Sagittarius soul's life where they're forced to make an impossible choice between what they love and who they are. Between holding on to something they once dreamed of and releasing it because it no longer honors the truth they've discovered along the way. And this is the paradox most people never understand about Sagittarius. They love more deeply than they let on, but they will still walk away if something begins to pull them out of alignment with their inner truth. Not because they don't care, but because they care enough to know that real love must never cost you yourself. This is a zodiac sign ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion. So when Sagittarius is forced to shrink, when they find themselves in places where truth is suppressed, when their freedom is quietly questioned, when their laughter starts to feel hollow, they begin to suffocate. And yet, they rarely react in anger. They simply begin the process of emotional untying. Not in drama, but in silence. They will still show up, still offer smiles, still ask how your day was, but behind the scenes, they are slowly rolling up the map of what once connected you, preparing for a journey they know they must take alone. A Sagittarius woman once told me, "I loved him so much I would have built a life anywhere, but every time I looked in the mirror I no longer saw myself." And when you lose yourself in the name of love, that isn't love anymore. It's sacrifice disguised as loyalty. That is the kind of heartbreak Sag endures, not the kind that breaks from betrayal, but the kind that shatters in silence because they realize they've stayed too long in a place that no longer reflects who they're becoming. This is not the kind of grief the world always understands. Most people speak of breakups as endings sparked by dramatic events. But for Sagittarius, endings often arrive softly. They notice one day they no longer speak freely, that they've stopped laughing from the belly, that their dreams now feel like dust instead of fire. And the most devastating part? They realize they've allowed it to happen because they loved so fiercely, they forgot to keep checking if they were still whole inside that love. It's hard to explain to someone who has never carried this kind of knowing. The knowing that if you stay, you might save the relationship, but lose the voice of your soul. So they let go. And this too is misunderstood. People say Sagittarius is afraid of commitment. But what they don't see is how much Sag is afraid of committing to something that requires them to be only half of who they are. They don't fear roots, they fear cages. And if a connection becomes a place where their wings must be clipped to keep someone else comfortable, they will always choose flight. Not because they don't value love, but because they were born to live it without conditions that strangle their essence. I remember a Sagittarius man who ended a 10-year friendship because, in his words, "I realized we were only friends with the version of me who kept his mouth shut." It wasn't a blow-up. No big fight. Just the quiet revelation that his light had been dimming slowly, and once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. That's the thing about Sag, they can tolerate so much. They'll joke through discomfort. They'll adapt again and again. But once they see the truth clearly, they can't pretend anymore. And that moment becomes the beginning of their letting go. This is not weakness. This is sacred discernment. Sagittarius doesn't believe in burning bridges. They believe in learning from every crossing. Even when they walk away, they carry gratitude. They remember the good. They honor what was. But they don't let nostalgia bind them to places they've outgrown. And this too is love, the love of self, the love of evolution, the love of all the versions of themselves they haven't met yet. Letting go for Sagittarius is not always about saying goodbye to people. It's also about shedding old beliefs, old patterns, old fears. They are spiritual archers. They don't just aim their arrows outward, they aim inward too. Constantly reorienting. Constantly asking, is this still true? Is this still right for me? And if the answer is no, they release. Sometimes quickly, sometimes painfully slowly, but always with intention. Always with the aching wisdom that you can't fly higher if you're still tethered to something that keeps asking you to stay small. And yet, their strength in letting go doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. In fact, it hurts deeply. Sagittarius grieves privately. They don't talk about the nights they stare at the ceiling wondering if they made the right decision. They won't mention the way a song, a scent, a phrase can make their whole body ache with the memory of something they had to release. They don't speak of it because they've made peace with the cost of living a truthful life. But the pain is real. The ache is real. It's just that for Sagittarius, freedom is not the absence of sorrow. It is the willingness to feel it all and still keep walking. And here's what the world forgets. Sagittarius doesn't let go to escape. They let go to become. Every loss, every goodbye, every door closed becomes a lesson carved into the architecture of their becoming. And what they lose, they don't lose lightly. They lay it down like a prayer, trusting that if it is meant to return, it will. And if not, then they were brave enough to live without it. So if you're a Sagittarius and you've had to walk away from something or someone you loved, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary, this is your truth. You are not heartless. You are courageous. You are not selfish. You are sacredly loyal to the light inside you. And no matter how many people misunderstand your departure, know this, your soul is proud of you. Because letting go of what you once begged the universe for, when it no longer matches the vibration of your truth, is the kind of maturity that only old souls know. Gate 3. Because they believe in soul love, even when the world doesn't. There's something about the Sagittarius heart that still dares to believe in soul love. Not just romance. Not partnership for convenience. Not the kind of union you can summarize in checklists or dating profiles. Sagittarius carries within them the ancient memory of a love that transcends timelines. A kind of love that feels like home even when everything else feels foreign. They believe in connections that aren't just written in fate, but etched in the stars before their soul even touched this earth. And it is this very belief that makes them both beautifully radiant and deeply misunderstood. People often think Sagittarius fears intimacy, that they run at the first sign of emotional depth. But those who have truly known them, known the way they linger with their gaze, the way their words carry oceans, the way they light up when they feel seen, know this. Sagittarius is not afraid of intimacy. They are afraid of shallow waters disguised as depth. They crave a connection that doesn't just touch the skin, but pierces through every layer of their being. They don't want a love that merely fits their life. They want a love that expands their soul. A Sagittarius woman once told me, "I'm not afraid to fall in love. I'm afraid of calling it love when it's only convenience. I want a love that mirrors the wildness in me, the one that speaks my language without translation." This is the silent ache they carry, the desire to meet someone whose presence doesn't tame them, but liberates them. They want to walk beside someone, not behind them, not ahead, but in sync step by step, both looking toward the horizon with wonder in their eyes and purpose in their hearts. And when Sagittarius does fall, they fall all the way in. It's not halfway, not cautiously, not with exit plans. It's with fire, with faith, with the raw vulnerability of someone who has tasted freedom and still chooses connection, not as a cage but as a sacred dance. And yet, because they burn so brightly in love, they are often left with ashes. People come into their lives enchanted by their spirit, drawn to their light, only to realize later that such fire demands responsibility. You cannot half-love a Sagittarius. You cannot ask them to dim their truth to make your comfort easier. When they give their soul, they ask for your soul in return. And when it's not returned, it breaks them. Not loudly, but with the quiet devastation of a fire slowly dying in the cold. And yet, even after being hurt, even after betrayal, Sagittarius does something astonishing. They still believe. They still look for the soul beneath the ego. They still speak to the light buried in others. Not because they're naive, but because they remember what it's like to be seen that way. And they cannot unlearn it. In astrology, Sagittarius is the seeker. The one who journeys across deserts and skies not to find something new, but to remember what has always been true. And soul love, to them, is not an escape from loneliness. It is the ultimate truth of existence. That two spirits can meet, beyond form, beyond past mistakes, beyond words, and recognize each other like two old fires finding the same wind. A Sagittarius man once shared, "I loved someone who couldn't love me back, not because they didn't care, but because they hadn't yet learned how to sit with their own soul. So I let them go. But every night, I still pray they remember who they are." That is Sagittarius in love. They don't just long to be loved. They long to remind others of their own sacredness, to ignite something holy in those who have forgotten. But this kind of love is heavy to carry alone. It's not always met, not always reciprocated. Sometimes Sagittarius goes years walking beside people who never fully arrive, never fully undress their spirit, never fully speak the truth they hold. And that silence becomes a grief Sag carries not in their words, but in the way they laugh a little quieter, in the way they pause longer before opening up again. Not because they've stopped believing, but because they've learned not every soul is ready for the kind of love they carry. Still, they do not lose faith. They may fold their hopes into poems, into long drives under the stars, into unspoken prayers whispered into campfires. But the dream lives on. They still imagine a love where both are free, both are fierce, both are growing without fear that they will outgrow each other. A love where the question is never will you stay, but will we keep walking forward together, even when the road disappears beneath our feet. And in that vision, Sagittarius is not just dreaming of romance. They are dreaming of transcendence, of a partnership that becomes a temple, a haven, a revolution of tenderness in a world too busy for soul. And maybe that's why they often end up alone. Not because they don't deserve love, but because they refuse to settle for anything less than real. And in a world that rewards convenience over courage, that kind of refusal is rare. So if you are Sagittarius and you've ever loved someone with your entire being, even when they couldn't hold it, even when they didn't see it, this is your reminder. Your love was not wasted. It was sacred. It planted seeds. Maybe not in them. Maybe not for now. But somewhere in this universe, your soul's devotion has echoed. And it will return to you. Not in replicas. Not in fragments. But in full-hearted presence, when both of you are ready. When both of you have finally walked far enough to meet again. This time not to fix, not to heal, but simply to be. Because Sagittarius, you were never meant to settle for a love that doesn't challenge you to rise. You were born to meet someone whose soul sets fire to the parts of you that once feared being fully seen. And until then, keep believing. Keep walking. Keep lighting the way with the flame only your soul knows how to carry. Gate 4. Because their awakening doesn't come with fireworks, it comes in silence. Not every awakening looks like a lightning bolt crashing into the sky. For Sagittarius, it often begins in the quiet. Those long, empty moments where the world offers no answers, and the only voice left is the one that rises from within. It doesn't always happen after a grand event. Sometimes it's in the simplest of places, sitting alone on a balcony at 2 a.m., feeling the ache of a question that has no name. Sometimes it's in a conversation where they smile politely, but inside, something is unraveling. Sometimes it's in the stillness that follows a heartbreak. Not the pain of being left, but the deeper pain of realizing how long they've been leaving themselves behind. Sagittarius, known for their fire, their boldness, their truth-telling, often awakens not through noise but through surrender. It's when the adventure no longer satisfies, when the laughter with others begins to echo hollow, When they realize they've traveled far and wide only to find that the one place they haven't dared to fully explore is their own heart. And that is where the true journey begins. Not on mountaintops, not in foreign lands, but inside the very soul they once tried to outrun. There's a chapter in every Sagittarius life where they begin to notice that the same roads no longer thrill them, that the same types of people no longer feel aligned, that the fire inside doesn't want to burn endlessly, it wants to burn true. This shift is subtle at first but irreversible. And when it comes, they start shedding identities like old skin. No longer interested in proving themselves, in pleasing others, in being the brightest in the room. Instead, they start craving something deeper, meaning, presence, rest. I once knew a Sagittarius man who spent years chasing success, relationships, admiration. From the outside, he was the embodiment of confidence. But one day, in a quiet forest retreat, he broke down, not from failure, but from realizing that no one, not even himself, truly knew who he was beyond what he gave. "I kept being everyone's light," he said, "until I realized I never let myself feel the dark." That was the beginning of his awakening, not as a crash, but as a slow, tender opening. Sagittarius carries the spirit of the seeker. Yes, but what most don't understand is that what they're truly seeking isn't out there. It's the part of themselves that got buried under expectations, under being strong, under always moving forward. Their soul wants to return, not to a place but to a frequency, a vibration of truth, one where they are loved not for what they do or how they inspire others, but simply for existing. That's why the spiritual awakening of Sagittarius is one of the most sacred. It's the moment they stop running and allow themselves to be still. And in that stillness, they begin to hear again. Not the voices of others, not the noise of the world, but the voice of their own knowing. They begin to remember the dreams they silenced, the feelings they minimized, the truth they postponed in the name of being brave. And they realize bravery isn't in always pushing through. Bravery is in resting when their soul is tired. Bravery is in grieving the parts of themselves they once had to abandon. Bravery is in speaking softly to their inner child and saying, "I haven't forgotten you." This awakening doesn't make Sagittarius softer in the weak sense. It makes them more authentic. They begin to say no to things they once said yes to out of guilt. They stop entertaining conversations that drain them. They stop chasing people who never see their depth. And perhaps most beautifully, they stop apologizing for who they are becoming. Because who they are becoming is someone who no longer needs to shine for validation. They shine because it's their nature. Quietly, powerfully, without explanation. A Sagittarius woman once told me, "The day I stopped trying to be everything for everyone was the day I started hearing the voice of God again." She didn't mean religion. She meant the sacred guidance that whispers only in stillness. The one that says, "You are enough. Come home." And that's what this gate is for Sagittarius. A homecoming. A return not to what the world wanted from them, but to what their soul always knew they were. Not just fire but light. Not just wisdom but presence. And here's the most humbling part. After this awakening, Sagittarius doesn't try to change others. They don't preach. They don't seek revenge. They simply become. They embody the calm after the storm, the laugh that no longer masks pain, the gaze that no longer seeks approval. They live not to escape, but to be wholly beautifully without needing to explain their softness or their strength. They no longer ask for permission to feel deeply. They no longer make themselves smaller to be palatable. They no longer wait to be chosen, they choose themselves. If you are Sagittarius and you felt this quiet unfolding in your own soul, know this. It's real. It's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. You are not losing your fire. You are learning how to carry it with grace. You are not giving up on people. You are returning to the kind of people who see your soul before they see your smile. You are not becoming distant. You are simply finding out that silence can be more sacred than words. You are not withdrawing, you are being reborn. And as you rise from this stillness, you carry something the world so desperately needs. The energy of a soul who is awake. A soul who doesn't love for gain. A soul who doesn't give to be praised. A soul who doesn't seek to be seen but sees. And in that presence, Sagittarius becomes not just a wanderer, but a guide. Not just a teacher but a mirror. Not just a seeker, but a sacred flame reminding us all that we too can stop running and come home to ourselves. Conclusion: you were never misunderstood by the universe, only by those who couldn't see the depth of your flame. Dear Sagittarius, you've walked through these gates not as a passive listener, but as a soul that's slowly remembering its light. You came here perhaps curious, perhaps weary, perhaps wondering why your heart has felt like both a compass and a battlefield. And now here you are, braver, softer, truer. Each chapter you've explored wasn't just a list of reasons. It was a return to the sacred truth of who you are. You were never too much, you were simply more than most could hold. You were never naive, you were loyal to a vision even when others lost faith. You didn't break easily, you chose not to harden. And perhaps the most misunderstood thing about you is the way you've always carried joy and sorrow side by side, never fully belonging to one or the other, but holding both like sacred truths. You are not meant to be understood by everyone. You are meant to be felt. And only the awake can truly feel you. The journey of Sagittarius is not linear. It's not about rising above, it's about rising through the illusions, through the longing, through the silence, through the ache of loving deeply in a world that moves too fast to feel. But look at you, you're still here, still believing, still burning, not wildly, not for show, but like a hearth that never goes out, even in the coldest winters. And so if these words touched a hidden part of you, let them stay. Let them echo in the moments when you feel alone. Let them remind you that even your solitude is sacred. You are not here to be like everyone else. You are here to show what it means to live soul first. And that is why, no matter how misunderstood you may have felt in this world, you have always been completely seen by the universe, by the divine, and now by yourself. If this journey held space for something inside you to exhale, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who needs to remember they are not alone. And more than anything, I ask you to keep walking softly, boldly, truly. Because Sagittarius, you are not just a fire sign. You are the firelight that shows others the way back home.